It was a brisk November evening in New York City, and the subway was its usual mix of chaos and routine. The flickering fluorescent lights, the faint smell of grease from street vendors, and the rhythmic clatter of trains echoed through the tunnels. Among the sea of commuters was someone who didn't quite belong, yet blended in effortlessly: Keanu Reeves. Dressed in a simple black coat, faded jeans, and a knit beanie, he sat quietly, gazing out of the window as the city's lights blurred into streaks. Keanu was no stranger to anonymity. Despite his immense fame, he often chose solitude, finding comfort in the ordinary. But tonight would be anything but ordinary. As the train pulled into the next station, the doors opened with their familiar chime, and a frail figure stumbled in. A man in his mid-40s, with disheveled hair, sunken cheeks, and clothes that had seen better days, clutched a crumpled paper bag. His name was Ethan, though few people cared to ask anymore. Life had not been kind to him. Once a hopeful musician, he had fallen victim to a series of unfortunate events, losing his family, his home, and his hope. Ethan shuffled awkwardly through the car, avoiding eye contact, muttering a quiet sorry as he brushed past knees and bags. He eventually settled on the floor near the door, his back against the cold metal. Most passengers pretended not to see him, their gazes fixed firmly on their phones or shoes. Keanu, however, watched him intently, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. Ethan began to hum softly, a melancholic tune that seemed to come from a place deep within. It wasn't long before the hum turned into a hauntingly beautiful melody, echoing faintly through the car. Keanu leaned forward, captivated by the man's voice. It was raw, cracked, yet undeniably soulful. When the train screeched to a halt at the next station, Ethan reached into his bag and pulled out an old, battered harmonica. With trembling hands, he played a few notes, the sound resonating with a heartbreaking purity. The melody caught the attention of a few passengers, who looked up briefly before returning to their indifference. Keanu, however, couldn't look away. He stood, moving closer to Ethan. "That's beautiful," he said softly, his voice cutting through the din of the subway. Ethan looked up, startled. For a moment, he seemed unsure whether Keanu was speaking to him or someone else. "Thanks," he mumbled, his eyes darting away. Keanu crouched beside him, his movements unhurried. "Do you have a name?" "Ethan," the man replied, his voice barely audible. "I'm Keanu," he said, extending his hand. Ethan hesitated, but eventually took it, his grip weak and uncertain. "What's your story, Ethan?" Keanu asked, genuinely curious. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "You don't want to hear it. It's not exactly a feel-good movie." "Try me," Keanu replied, his tone calm but insistent. And so Ethan spoke. He talked about the band he used to play with, the gigs that barely paid, the wife who left, and the addiction that followed. He spoke of shelters, cold nights, and the relentless cycle of rejection and despair. As Ethan talked, Keanu listened intently, his face a mask of quiet empathy. When Ethan finished, there was a long silence between them, filled only by the rattling of the train. "You've got talent," Keanu finally said. "And I think the world needs to hear it." Ethan shook his head. "That world doesn't want me anymore." "Maybe it's time to prove it wrong," Keanu said, pulling out a pen and scribbling something on a piece of paper. He handed it to Ethan. "Meet me here tomorrow at noon." Ethan stared at the paper, confused. "Why? What's this about?" "Just be there," Keanu said with a small smile. The next day, Ethan hesitated as he approached the address Keanu had given him. It was a small recording studio tucked away in a nondescript building. His hand shook as he opened the door. Inside, Keanu was waiting, along with a sound engineer and a set of instruments. "What's this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A second chance," Keanu replied. Over the next few hours, Ethan poured his soul into the microphone, playing his harmonica and singing like his life depended on it. Keanu watched from the control room, his eyes glistening with emotion. The result was a raw, hauntingly beautiful track that Keanu insisted on releasing anonymously. "Let the music speak for itself," he told Ethan. Within weeks, the song gained traction online. Listeners were captivated by the mysterious artist with a voice that carried so much pain and hope. Ethan's life began to change. He received invitations to perform, interviews with journalists eager to uncover his story. For the first time in years, he felt seen. But the story doesn't end there. Months later, Ethan received an invitation to an exclusive event at a renowned music hall. As he nervously walked onto the stage, the spotlight illuminated him. The crowd erupted into applause, but Ethan's eyes searched for one face in particular. Keanu was there, standing in the shadows, a small smile playing on his lips. He raised a hand in a quiet gesture of support. Ethan approached the microphone, his harmonica clutched tightly. "This is for everyone who's ever felt invisible," he said, his voice steady, "and for the person who reminded me I wasn't." As Ethan played, the audience fell silent, the haunting melody wrapping around them like a shared memory. Later that night, Ethan found Keanu backstage. "Why did you help me?" he asked, tears in his eyes. Keanu's reply was simple but profound. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to pay it forward." And with that, Keanu disappeared into the night, leaving Ethan to bask in the applause of a world that had finally heard his voice.